Great. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Metaphysical Insight. This week, I am thrilled to have good friends of mine and guests from Time Zone Tours in Salisbury, Wiltshire, England. One of my favorite places. If you love the prehistoric like I do, it doesn't get better than Wiltshire. Um, I've got Matt and Ruby and Frog, and I will let them introduce themselves to you and give you a little bit of an idea about what they do. And they have lots of irons and lots of fires, all of them. Ruby, why don't you start?
Lady.
You. It doesn't matter.
Okay, so I'm Matt Pike, and I think I've had the pleasure of being on your show before, William. And yes. These are I'm very pleased to say, are my colleagues. We've worked together for the last 5-6 years now. Very inspirational historians and researchers. So much we've learned so much off each other, and yeah, really special people. Beyond that, I still continue to work at Stonehenge. Enjoying my work there. It's Equinox coming up very soon, so it's a special time for us at the Stones. It's one of the days that we celebrate there. Sadly, we're not opening access this year. But there's still quite a lot of people who are celebrating now. And yeah, these guys are fantastic. I'm working on a few bits and pieces. I've been interviewing rather weirdly interviewing my grandmother recently. And I know my grandmother very well. Obviously, she's my grandmother. But I interviewed her properly. I got a recorder out. Spent 3.5 hours trying to pick her brains about a few subjects, and I was vastly inspired by that recently. So that's a project I'm working on at the moment. But I hand you over to my esteemed colleague from Time Zone, Ruby.
Hello, I'm Ruby Vittorino Moody, and I'm married to this guy, Frog Moody. So obviously I'm one of Time Zone, and I do historical research. But I'm also a mature student. I went back to university and I do script writing. So I'm also a writer, and I'm working on a book, The A to Z of the Haunch of Benson, which is the most haunted pub in Salisbury. So over to Frog.
Hi, I'm Frog Moody. More of a researcher, I would say, than a writer, but I do both. Proud to be part of Time Zone Tours, obviously. I got commissioned to write a book called Haunted Salisbury, and through that got very interested in the supernatural. Hence my second book I'm working on at the moment, called Supernatural Salisbury. But it's actually Supernatural Salisbury and surrounding villages all around Salisbury, Amesbury, small villages. I'm about probably about halfway through the book. I've had quite a lot of people contacting me with stories, and yeah, it's looking really good. It's the first book that I've written on my own, because I co-write with other authors, but this is the first one I'm doing. Yeah, and surprising, although it's the first book I'm doing on my own, it looks like it's been the best one. So perhaps I should have done it on my own before.
Yeah.
No, it is looking really good.
Good. And I've enjoyed the other books of yours I've read, but I'm looking forward to getting copies of all of the new books coming out from you all. This is fantastic. Now, how has it been with the tours this year with the pandemic and everything else? Are you figuring out ways to be able to do them, or
well,
take the public in some way or another?
Yeah, it's been very disappointing this year, because we had a full program planned, because it's the 800th anniversary of Salisbury Cathedral. So our planned walks were around Salisbury Cathedral Close, and with COVID, we really had to knock everything onto the head, because the government over here keep on changing the rules. So just as you find ways to do things, you're scuppered, and that's really why we had one particular walk worked out for the Salisbury History Festival that I organise each year. But even that one had to be cancelled as well. So it's been very disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Now, how can people find, because I know you did an online version of the History Festival, how can people find that?
If they go to our website, which is salisburyhistoryfestival.co.uk, all the films that we've made, short presentations on historical presentations, are all available on that.
Okay, very good, thank you. And I've watched some, and it's definitely worth the time, and I highly recommend it to people. So, excellent. Now, how did you guys get started as a team, as doing the tours?
Someone else will have a go?
Well, I started work at Stonehenge, and I only worked there for a few months, during the summer season. But I started on the first day as this guy,
Yeah, we had a good.
Matt Pike. So we went for lunch together, I think, and then Matt had a car, so he offered to drive me home. And in the car, I told him that my partner was Frog Moody, and he'd read Frog's book, and we got talking about Teddy Haskell. And then we said, oh, we'd all meet together down the pub at the Duke of York. And it all grew from there. We had this idea that we all loved history, and we all wanted to, we wanted to show people Salisbury. And we started Time Zone together.
Yeah, it was a really serendipitous moment. I love that word. But yeah, it really was. Yeah. It was one of those things where everything just sort of collides. And it's a bit fanboyish. I think I know Frog well enough to say this now. But I had Googled him before I'd ever met him, twice. And I said to my now wife, Natalie, that I'd really like to meet that guy. It just sounds really interesting. And then we have this moment where me and Rubes end up having a fairly, not quite forced, but when you start your first day at work, they say, okay guys, well done, you've done your 3 PowerPoints, off you go for lunch. And so you're meeting a new group of people, and it was just this wonderful moment where me and Ruby kind of sort of realized we were very much into the same sort of thing. And then I heard her boyfriend was, called Crikey, Frog Moody. Subsequently, over the years, I've learned it's okay. He's a lovely chap. He's a lovely chap. But he is human. He is human.
Oh, good.
Yeah, an inspirational chap. But yeah. So I'd actually read your book on the Teddy Haskell murder, and I was so, because the Teddy Haskell murder. I think when we did talk about this on the conference, didn't we? When he met us before, I think we talked about.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we went by his house.
Yeah, that's I thought so.
Part. Yeah.
It was a couple of years ago now, but so Frog's expertise on the Haskell case, and I lived one street away from that, and my back garden backed onto the back garden that was next to the Haskell house, and my friend lived at the Haskell house, and so I had a multi-level interest in the story. But I'm sure Frog will tell you all about it if you ask him, William. It's a very interesting tale, is it not?
Yeah.
Probably. The Haskell case.
I love the introduction and the way you just moved that.
Yeah. It's good.
But the Teddy Haskell case is probably Salisbury's most infamous case, and it surrounds the murder of a young boy. It's completely unsolved to this day, and I'd been dipping in and out of this case, researching probably for about 10 years. And even my own father told me bits and pieces about it because it had that much impact on the older generation of Salisbury. So to be able to write on it and get the book done for the centenary, actually that was the plan, to make sure that this book came out on the centenary of the boy's murder. And I teamed up with a chap called Bruce Purvis, who worked at our local library, who'd had a book published on Salisbury. And because he was the manager of Salisbury Library, and I was always looking at the old newspaper on a microfiche machine, he'd look over my shoulder, and I'd always be looking at murder cases. And he said to me, you're a bit strange, aren't you? Keep on looking at all these murder things, you're a bit strange. So when I actually said, look, do you want to work with me on writing this book about this boy? He jumped at the chance, and I said, yeah, I'm not that weird, am I? So we wrote this book together, and it was it was great fun writing with Bruce because we didn't always see eye to eye, because there was speculation that the boy's mother had committed the crime.
Right.
And I actually thought that the mother had committed the crime, and Bruce, I was working with, was convinced that she didn't. So that led to quite a few sort of like heated, healthy, heated debates, let's say. Yeah. But it was,
well, what do you think now? Do you think she committed it?
Looking into it a little bit deeper, I don't think that she did. I think there's still something very strange about it. I'm of the opinion that if she didn't commit the crime, she either knew the person that did commit the crime or was certainly there when the person committed the crime. So it checks all these conspiracy things in there. There were just one or two elements about the way the blood sprayed, because the boy had his throat cut, lying in bed and stuff. So it's been amazing because just as the book went to, it was about to go to print, we found this possible suspect, but we didn't have a chance really to do any real research into this chap called John Ray. And Ruby then jumped on the case and researched this guy John Ray as a real possible suspect. So she's taken the case further. So if we ever do a rewrite, then we'll write this in, because some people think that we've nailed it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, because I could see you shaking your head about the mother, and now you've got this other piece. So.
Oh, I don't think the mother did it at all. I look at a load of crime programs, and I was just looking at a program the other day talking about child murders, and it said in about 70% of cases it is the actual parents or somebody close to the child that's probably murdered them.
Yeah.
But that leaves 30% of cases where it isn't, and you can't. It is one of the first people that the police look at, and that is the parents, but it's not always the case. And in this case, I really don't think it is at all. But I did find another suspect, and that person was an ex-soldier. And of course, the little boy had his throat cut, and had it cut in such a way that the person knew very well how to go deep enough where the artery was. It was somebody who knew something about that. And so I think an ex-soldier would fit the bill. And this person was very odd. He lived a double life. He was violent, and his children were at school with Teddy. He did have children, and Teddy had money in the drawer. And maybe he would have told his school friends that. So there's a way this guy could have known. Anyway, that's my favourite suspect.
But I mean, the interesting thing about the case is when you start researching this sort of thing, and you want to know as much as possible about forensics, for instance. So I found myself going down to the library and looking at books on forensics, because the mother's story was that on the night of the murder, a man came running down the stairs, and as he ran past her, he threw the knife that hit her, and then he ran out the front door. Well, when the pathologist came down from Scotland Yard to work on his case, his findings were that the blood splashes were not consistent with having a knife thrown. The actual blood tails, and there was arterial sprays on the mother's dress that were consistent with a throat being cut, and the last you breathe in and then the air you breathe out is very arterial, very small, very minute spots. And that's what she had on her blouse. So Augustus Pepper, who was the Home Office pathologist, who actually worked on the Dr. Crippen case, and was accepted. Well, really, it was Augustus Pepper that had final say about Crippen being found guilty, really, because all the pathological things that we through our brought up. It was only the fact that the mother, Flora Haskell, had a brilliant defence, Raina Goddard, that she got off. If Raina Goddard had been prosecuting, the chances are she would have been found guilty. It was a brilliant defence.
Okay.
But she probably would have been found guilty simply because they didn't have another suspect there. They couldn't find the person, I think it is, the ex-soldier. They looked for him. He disappeared from Salisbury. So they just sort of gave up on him because they became convinced it was the mother. I think that she had some spray on her because she ran up to the room and bent over the bed when she realised that somebody with a knife had just run out the bedroom. And I had a very interesting conversation with a crime writer called Diane James. I recommend her books, and she writes some crime novels, and she knows all about the Haskell murder, and she lectures on it to forensic students. And she said to me at the end, she does like a trial with them, and they examine the evidence, and then they vote on it. And she said none of the students, she's forensic students, have ever voted that Flora was guilty. They all think that she was not guilty. And they probably know a lot more about forensics now than they would have back then when it was more in its infancy. Anyway.
Right.
To be fair, William, one of the great things about this case is that it's sparked conversation. Right from the very first time I met Frog, I had this meeting of Ruby at Stonehenge, but the very first time I went to the Duke of York, when I knew these guys were here, the conversation was all about this case. And it rang around the pub for years. And if anything, the investigation into this case is one of the main catalysts for the Fish and History Society and Time Zone as well, because people were arguing about it. Like, people who lived in the houses. I was lucky enough to know that Phil, who doesn't live there anymore, but he lived in the house where the murder happened, and he was friends with my wife's brother. So I was like, oh, I can get you in this house. No, can you really? And so we started looking in the house, and Phil was stripping the wallpaper from his stairwell, and he found this really nasty, jagged scar in the plaster, and it was sort of through our discussions we realised that was where they'd taken a sample of the wallpaper, which was covered, and we started making all these. And at one stage, you were willing to, should I say this? You were willing to give some of your own blood to be splattered down the stairwell to prove the viscosity and the velocity it would fall while they redecorating, because we were so into this case, and we've argued about it lots. I'll be honest, I think that Flora probably had something to do with it somewhere. And I don't want Ruby to punch me because she's really close right now. No. She could probably take, but again, it's something that we've investigated, we've re-investigated, and we've talked about. We've even been on the BBC talking about it, haven't we? Yeah. Well, you guys especially. And and one of the weirdest things about the whole story is it happened on Halloween. It happened on the 31st of October. So when we first started thinking, let's write a tour. Let's do a tour. Let's do it around Fisherton, the area we loved, and there's so much history with the jail, subject I was very close to, and Scammell, and this other stuff. And yeah, it just lent it. The Haskell, it's almost gone from being a really horrible case to becoming almost mythologized, because it's so important locally to this story and how it happened, and to have the honour of being. Because the owner of the house even at one stage put an image of Teddy on the outside window of their house permanently. Because the story was sort of like it sort of just stuck in the local psyche. It was an amazing story.
You should charge £1 for everybody coming by to stare at the house.
Well, you say that, but that's one of the things that happened was just prior to the book coming out. I thought to myself, it's not really fair, because if this book comes out, you might get people wanting to go up at the house, go up there and and stare at the house, or even knock on the door. So I went to the house and I knocked on the door, and I told them that this book was coming out, and just to sort of like give them the heads up. And I said, the reason I'm telling you this is that if you get people knocking on your door, at least you know that this book's out in Salisbury. And it was a chap called Patrick, well, I'd obviously never met these people. And I said, did you know about the murder? He said, oh yeah, we knew about the murder. Would you like to come in? And I said, you're joking, come into the, he said, yeah, come in. So I went into the house, and he showed me all over the house, including the room where the boy was murdered. And it was really quite strange. And I said, is the house haunted? Have you heard any strange sounds or anything? And he said, actually, no. He said, in fact, my grandchildren sleep in the same room as Teddy, who was murdered in. I said, oh, that's really interesting. I went back to the house and said, could I come back in with my good friend George Fleming? George Fleming is a Salisbury historian who has got a very sharp mind. And yeah, he acted, I was researching the story. Bruce, as I mentioned, was doing the writing, but George was like a historical advisor, and he'd be a referee, because me and Bruce were arguing so much. George was in the middle saying, hang on here. He was absolutely brilliant. But I took him to the house and said to the owner, Patrick, introduced George, and said, could we come in? We'd like to take a few measurements. So we took a few measurements. For instance, we know that the mother was stood right at the door, just in front of the staircase, where the man came running down, supposedly threw the knife. So we took measurements, and in fact, we took measurements of the whole house, and just to conduct a really thorough investigation, which was So I think that book, my two mates here would probably agree that it's probably the most thorough book that you're ever going to write on that case, because it includes Flora's, the mother's, what they call them, testimonies, yeah. So everything there is to, the great thing about it is up at the PRO, Public Record Office in London. I went up there to see, I'd heard that there was 1 or 2 records kept up there on this particular case. So I went up, and what you do up there, they give you a bleep, and then you've got like a table with a number on it, and then when the records are in your locker, they bleep you to go and pick them up. And there was a big box there full of all these. I thought, this is great, it's a load of stuff here. And one of these files were actually done up with pink ribbon. And as I undid it, dust come off. And I thought, no one's looked at this for absolute ages. This is fantastic, Yeah, hoping I was going to actually find something that someone else had missed, might solve the case. So anyway, it took me something like 4 hours to go through this box of records, and I photocopied every single item, and I think at the time there were 15p per photocopy, and the bill came £35. So that shows you. Anyway, I took the box back and said, oh, thank you very much. I said, that's been absolutely fascinating. And they said, well, what about the other one? I said, other what? They said, well, there's another box. I said, you're joking. And there was another box of files on this case. So everything on this case, which is brilliant, has been preserved in the records of the PRO, right down to the drawings of the area. It's all there. All the eyewitness testimonies, the whole thing is still there in these records. So it was great fun researching that case.
But sorry, Frog, just to interrupt, Frog, because you told me a great story about this as well. Just before you went to press.
Oh yeah.
Just before you went to press, something turned up, didn't it?
Yeah, we were about to go to press the night before, and I'd already traced the grandson of a chap called Chief Constable Richardson, and Chief Constable Richardson was the Salisbury policeman who had worked on this particular case. So his grandson was getting on, he was 70, something like that, and I kept on phoning this chap. I had his phone number because there was, in Salisbury Public Library, there was a sheet of paper with a little bit about the case, not much, just a bit, but a phone number. And I kept on phoning it up, and eventually got through to this chap and arranged to meet him. And he'd never heard of the Teddy Haskell case. He said, my grandfather kept everything. He was a self-publicist. He kept everything, but we've never heard of this case. I said, have you got any pictures or anything at all? He said, no. He said, I can categorically tell you, we've got nothing. And the first I've ever heard of this murder case that my grandfather supposedly worked on is when you actually told me. So anyway, I was disappointed over that. And then one day I got another phone call, and he said, my sister lives down in Wimborne, which is not too far from Salisbury, and she's got our grandfather's medals and all that sort of thing, testimonies for his time in the Salisbury Police Force. Would you like to see them? I said, yeah, okay. So I drove down there, and the night before I drove down there, my car was broken into, so all the windows all completely smashed in, but I had it all picked up. I got down there, and she said, I've got some glass cases here with medals from my grandfather, but there's nothing else at all. So, okay. So I was looking at this stuff, and I said, you've got nothing else at all? She said, no. She said, well, there's one or two photographs in the loft. And I said, what are they of? She said, well, bits and pieces, but they're nothing to do with the case. It's just sort of like odds and ends. And I said, well, can I have a look at them just in case? And she sighed. Oh. All right. And I said, look, I'll go in the loft if you like. But she insisted. So she got this ladder, went into the loft, and came back down with this photograph album, big photograph album. She had to hand it down to me, heavy. It was thick, about that thick. I took it downstairs to the kitchen. I took the first page, and it had Meadow Road, the actual, from 1908, the actual road where the murder took place. And this album was taken for the inquest a week after the murder. And it even had the boy's bedroom with blood still on the pillow. And I said, this whole album is the Teddy Haskell murder case, taken probably the same week as the murder was committed. She said, well, we have no idea what it was. She said, oh, you've solved a puzzle there. We didn't know. But, even in one of the pictures, you could see the sign, Meadow Road. But nice. So I went through this album, and it was just, my hands, I have to tell you, my hands were shaking.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah, my hands were shaking. But there was something like 2 months to go before the book was due to be published. So hold fire on everything. You'd never guess what I found. But she wouldn't allow me to take the album out of the house, but I photographed every single page, every single photograph, and showed George, and they were saying, what a find. I mean, that's a once-in-a-lifetime chance, but it's only through perseverance. Are you sure you haven't got anything? Yeah. Call it, I don't know what it was, but I just couldn't believe that they would not have anything on the case. So it was great, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. You guys may wind up getting a solid solution to this yet. With that, the way you keep finding pieces and evidence, I can just see coming up with an airtight case. But,
you get researchers who are academics, and they're absolutely brilliant, and they're spot on, really good. But George Fleming, who is a trained lecturer, said to me, he said, well, you're not an academic. He said, but you're what I consider to be a lucky researcher. It's almost like, do you know what I mean? It's stuff seems to find its way to me. You've got to look for it, but it just seems to, because I've done stuff on Titanic, and stuff just comes to you. It's just, call it luck. I don't know what it is, but I'm glad in that way, because I perish the thought of having to go all over the country to look at archives when I just have to go to one place, and it's just you find all these gold nuggets.
That's fantastic. I love it. Well, you've done work on the name just slipped out of my brain too.
What other books?
Well, you did work, and excuse me the way my brain does sometimes. The guy that was killing all the prostitutes in London.
Yeah.
I quite like the way his mind works.
My brain just short sometimes.
Yeah.
We've done lots of work on Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, because I think all three of you worked on
that. This is their thing.
That's how we met.
Yeah, this is their thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a society in London called the Whitechapel Society, and they meet 6 times a year to the guest speaker to talk about the Ripper case. They have academics and policemen and all sorts of people there. And I was on the committee of the Whitechapel Society, and Ruby came to one of our meetings, and that's how we met. Yeah.
Wow.
We were going to have some T-shirts printed up. Jack the Ripper, bringing couples together since 1888. We thought.
Too soon. Yeah. Too soon.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I mean, the way people, I like seeing how things work together that way. Way people meet, the little links here and there, and how it just all stumbles into place sometimes.
That's how we met you.
Yeah.
William, isn't it? Let's face it.
Yeah, exactly. I went to a Ghost Club conference that you three were doing and holding in Salisbury, and hanging out after, and then that amazing day that we all spent together, at least on my part it was, afterwards, that next trip and everything, and it's amazing. I feel very fortunate in the way synchronicity, serendipity, whatever works sometimes. And
beautiful. It's a beautiful word.
That was a case, because if you hadn't come on the Sunday, because a lot of people, it was a weekend thing, but a few people came on the Sunday, a bit of additional chat and about how the week was on. And you came to the
right.
Yes.
And we've been friends ever since. So
yeah.
Oh, and the haunch thing. Ruby is the haunch expert par excellence. And sorry, you speak French, so that's probably really bad.
No.
That's all right. But yeah, so Ruby's been working on that a lot, and I know last time we spoke, William, we talked about the windows bursting open and all that sort of thing.
Right.
2 other witnesses here now, 2 other people who were there, and we, as you rightly said, we organised that event, and I'm willing to swear down right now, we didn't do that.
No.
Okay. All 3 of us here now will say right now, we had nothing to do with those windows bursting open, and we were every moment spun out as you guys were. And I know there was. I don't think you think there was, but there was an element of maybe they did that. We did
really?
not do that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I know you didn't. I know you didn't. You're honest historians. You don't fake things.
No, I know.
2, I saw the window, and there was nobody touching it.
No.
And I believe the owner of the restaurant that the lights hadn't done that before. He doesn't have anything to gain by playing a parlor trick.
Yeah.
He has something to lose by doing it. And it's real. It's.
I don't know about the electrics on that place, but I mean the windows certainly just surprised.
Yes.
And the electrics, these things get upgraded periodically, and okay, it's possible that it was just one day the first time it happened, but if it hasn't happened since, it makes it suspect to be, a piece of malfunctioning gear or something.
Well, what I'd say is, I don't really believe in ghosts. There's something. If you had to say to me, do you really believe in ghosts? I would say no, despite a story of my grandmother's. I might tell you later, but there's one place on the planet really makes me doubt, and that is the haunch of Ellison, because there is something really strange. And another day, when all 3 of us were there with my brother, I'd gone into the haunch a bit earlier to leave my bag, and they were sweeping up glass on the floor, and they said, oh, well, there was glass falling off the table. We came there after we'd done our walk, we sat down, we had a newspaper out on the table, and there was a pint on the centre of it, but it was a full pint, and the table wasn't shiny or wet because it was on the newspaper. and somehow that glass went on the floor. So then we went back and we bought another glass. Now I know one thing, once you've knocked a glass on the floor, or a glass has mysteriously ended up and you've got to go and buy another pint, you're really careful with that glass, aren't you?
Hell yeah.
Well, I tell you, I saw it jump. It didn't slide across the table, it jumped.
Yeah.
And I remember just sort of saying, it jumped. And, you know, it happens in a second. So afterwards, you doubt yourself. You think, well, but then you think, well, actually, that glass was in the middle of the table and everyone was paying attention, not so it didn't happen again. So that's 3 glasses that have gone. When I said to the barmaid, you know, it's incredible, 3 glasses smashed in the evening, he said, oh, well, that's not the only one. While you weren't there, there was another glass came off another table. It's always in the downstairs bar, and it happens on the same evening. Well, you know, I saw it myself. So say, well, I don't believe it. And then I say, well, that window, how did that happen? How did those glasses fall on the floor? I don't know.
It wasn't even a stormy night. I mean, it couldn't even have been wind that blew that window open.
Well, it opened outside, towards the outside anyway, and we were all inside, and it had quite warm. I don't see how that happened. And it had the latch down. And yeah, so, you know, there's something. So when I say I don't believe it, there's, you know, I've got a doubt there. And my friend, I went there with my friend Samantha, and Samantha is a trained medium. So we were in the little bar at the top, and she said, you know, that's where they found a mummified hand that had been bricked up in the fire.
I was wondering, I thought so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said to me, she saw a young man with red hair and acne. She said he was the owner of the hand, but he wasn't somebody evil. He was somebody but he'd done something bad and got into trouble. But she saw him in the top bar. Now, I think I say my little talk on one of the landlords on the Salisbury History Festival. Certainly, the people that lived there before, at the beginning of the last century, the daughter felt there was something evil in that room. So. Who knows? I think it's probably the hand of an executed criminal that was found there. But
you might be wrong.
I might be wrong. Yeah.
The idea
you probably are. You rarely are.
The idea of the glasses, though, because we were commissioned to do Haunted Salisbury by History Press, and at the time of researching that book, I didn't believe in ghosts, and I remember distinctly getting in contact with the History Press and saying, look, are you sure that I'm the right person to be doing this? Because I don't believe in ghosts. To which they replied, look, don't worry about it. Just write out what you know through ghost stories that happened in Salisbury years ago. They wanted a collection of quite famous ghost stories, some of which I've sent to you, I think, haven't I, for your magazine? Yeah. But I was in there.
I read the book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just before that book was about to go to the publishing company, I was in there with someone I knew a long time ago, and she had a full pint of beer, and I had a full pint of cider, and they were both on cardboard beer mats, and mine started to move, and it actually went across the table. It was gliding across the table. It went off the beer mat. And hers was perfectly still, and mine moved. And we just both, as 2 people, and we both watched it go off the edge of the table. And that was great for me, because I was able to contact the History Press and say, I believe in something now, because I've seen something in the Haunted Venison. So that's Salisbury's most haunted pub, isn't it? I said, well, it's probably Salisbury's most haunted building. So
I would think so. Probably is. Although Salisbury is old enough that, I mean, I know the town was built in about 1220 when they moved from Old Sarum, but was there already settlement there at the time? Did it go back to Roman or Anglo-Saxon or prehistoric?
villages around which were old, but that land was between the villages. It belongs to the bishop, and there was a well on it which was Mary's, called Mary's Well, and they had seen a ghost, in fact, around that well, which they said was the Virgin Mary. But that's where the cathedral is built. But then probably, it has been speculated by some historians that they would have a marketplace maybe held there as well, simply because in a sort of crossroads between these different villages, which was where the St Clement's Church, St Martin's Church, these are now part of Salisbury.
Okay. And adding to that, because Ruth's absolutely right, but adding to that, geographically, you have the 5 rivers, don't you?
Oh yeah.
You have this culmination of these rivers all converging on this point. So it's just like Ruth says, it's this geographical gathering point, and all the lovely nutrients that come down through the river basin and all that. So it's like when we talk about the sort of Neolithic and Stonehenge area, we talk about bowls of habitation, and that's because so much goodness is rushed down the riverbeds, and it makes it much easier to grow stuff around there. Just like going way back to the Nile Delta and that sort of stuff.
Right.
We have these. So weirdly, like, because Old Sarum, the big problem with Old Sarum is water. I think it's like 60 meters down or something insane like that. It's like they used to have to drop a bucket down so far. They were arguing with water. So let's go to somewhere where there's water everywhere. In fact, water's almost a problem, really, isn't it? It's
right. It was something of a swamp.
Shallow, what's the word? Foundations. Incredibly shallow foundations on almost gravel, which makes it strange to think how majestically it stands after all these years and all that. But yeah,
it sort of floats.
Yeah, so it does. Yeah, it does sort of float.
It's shingle, doesn't it? It's shingle there.
It's flooded. It's been flooded lots of times. Beautiful photographs even of the cathedral filled with water.
Water's a subject with I don't know. We didn't really. Did we do a Halloween tour with William, or did we go really grim with them? I can't remember.
No, we did walk round
St Thomas's.
Yes, but also around the cathedral close. We did walk around.
What I was thinking of is more the water quality around Salisbury. This is what I was thinking because of this high water table we have in Salisbury, and St Thomas's Church is a really good example of this. We have a very large amount of bodies placed in the People's Church, as it was called, or whatever it was. And then because of the chalk and the way that the water system works here, the water flows through these deceased people over these many years, and it creates. I haven't got the quote with me, but I think I'm sure it's like William Defoe or someone like that referred to it as beautifully scented water or something like that. But it ain't beautifully scented. You know what I'm saying? Well, it was not good. And also Salisbury or New Sarum was famous for its rivulets, wasn't it? These flowing streams that ran through the city.
Little Venice.
Little Venice, thank you. Yeah. So this idea, they were so obsessed with bringing clean flowing water that it actually bit them in the butt a little bit, because they ended up being caught out with cholera. Lots of cholera.
I was going to say, it sounds like a recipe for cholera, diphtheria, typhoid.
Yes, it's very special water in Salisbury.
It's the way it was where I live, actually. We had lots of streams running through above ground. Everything's underground now. And the water was deadly. Now, it wasn't deadly once it got out of the breweries. We had some pretty good breweries going on, too. And actually, we've gone back to it. It's not that big of a town, and we've got distilleries and breweries and stuff like crazy. But yeah, the water was deadly.
That's the thing. You were safe drinking beer, and so you ale in the morning, and that would, and even kids would be drinking ale in the morning, because it's better that than the tepid, water that was coming from downstream from whatever. Yeah.
They still do it in Salisbury. There's a pub called Wetherspoons. They drink there early in the morning.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of? So I'm doing this new book, Supernatural Salisbury, as we mentioned, and this chap called Lee sent me a message on Facebook to say that he goes outside, or on 4 occasions he's been outside of his house for a cigarette. He's not allowed to smoke indoors by his wife, so he goes out sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning, and he started hearing the sound in distance of a battle. And he said, did you know anything about it? I said, no. First I've heard of it. I said, how many times has this happened? And he said, about 3. And then he got in contact again about 2 weeks after that to say it's happened again last night.
Where does he live?
I think he lives in near Odstone.
Ah,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Because I found out that it was a great mustering ground for soldiers at Clarendon Palace.
Yeah.
There, on those grounds
No, it's the
there,
opposite.
they had thousands and thousands of soldiers that would get ready there, muster to go down to Southampton to go across.
Well, I questioned him because I didn't know whether to put it in the book because I've never heard of ghostly battles before in my life. Although I've researched on the internet now, and there are books on famous battles. But obviously, it's the one place where you've got lots of dead bodies.
Right.
So, but he said, the only way I can explain it, it sounds like something out of the film Braveheart, where there's lots of men shouting and, he tried to write it off himself by saying, I know how sound can travel, and maybe it was, but this was 3 o'clock in the morning. So, I did a little bit of research and found out that the actual area he's talking about, there were battles because there's Wilton, which was the ancient capital of Wessex, around these times. And the Danes, on more than one occasion, came to try and plunder Wessex. And towards the end, the Bretonians started building fortifications very close to where this guy actually lives. So maybe there's something in it, but I mean, he swears that it's true. So I've included it in the book.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I definitely want to read this book. It's amazing the types of records that are left behind that we hear, and it's not necessarily a conscious individual or something, but I don't know exactly how it works. There are lots of theories. I know what I see, I know what I read, and I'm very skeptical too. I have to see things before I believe in that type of phenomena. And it's a great way to meet people. I meet a lot of dead people that are really nice.
The thing about this particular book, the Supernatural Salisbury, because whereas Haunted Salisbury was more, as I mentioned, it was more established ghost stories that perhaps a lot of people already know, although they hadn't been really put into one book specifically on Salisbury, so that was its charm. But at least on this new book, it's an opportunity to, because at the moment there's only 4 chapters, but they cover alchemy and they cover witchcraft in quite detail, ghosts and all the rest of it. But it's an opportunity to go into it in a bit more detail and research in a bit more detail, rather than just have small short stories here and there. It's actually homing in on stuff, and I'm learning loads. I'm learning loads stuff about history.
Fantastic. Now, are you able to, or are you putting in this some of the spirituality or practice? It's hard because prehistoric, we don't know a lot, but you live in an area that is rich in Neolithic through modern times, and I'm assuming probably Mesolithic as well. But
I want to go back to to the early side of things. If I was, I'd contact Matt here, because he's more the expert on that.
So you can go, I can give you an answer. The oldest thing we've got in Salisbury, way back, as far as we can go with Salisbury history, is that they have a mammoth skeleton. It was found not far from your house, actually.
Yeah.
But the great thing about that is that underneath it, they found a hand axe, and that is about as far as we can get. It's the oldest item they've got in the Salisbury Museum, and that's Paleolithic. So that's we're going back some serious years there. But
that's probably at least 30,000-40,000 years BC.
Yeah, we're not far off there, William. Yeah, it's a really you can date things using something called isotope analysis, and it's like a radiation echo. You can date things pretty accurately, and I don't know if they've done that on that object. I imagine they have. You're probably right, yeah. But right next to your house, you've got some really weird stuff going on, haven't you? You've got like
we live in Highfield Road in Salisbury, and we have the Highfield pit dwellings.
Exactly, yeah.
And these were
they
were called Highfield pit dwellings, and they thought that people were actually living in these hexagon-shaped pits. But they've discounted that now. They thought they were actually abodes where they actually slept in these pits. But it's been suggested, or almost proven now, I think, that the pits were actually dug for food when they finished, bones or something. Chuck them in.
Rubbish.
Yeah, rubbish.
Midden pits.
Midden
pits is what we call it. Yeah.
But the reason they thought they were dwellings was there was one or two human skeletons found in there. So I mean, obviously, when someone died, they're about to fill it in, and they just put the person in there.
Yeah.
And that led to experts thinking these are actually, they're still known as the Highfield pit dwellings to this day, but they weren't for people, they were for deposits.
Yeah. Do they have dates on them?
That's going to be about the same time as you're talking about.
No, I think it's a little bit later. I think it's I'm talking off the top of my head here, but I think we're talking sort of Mesolithic, maybe early Neolithic. But I'd probably have to check that, to be honest with you, William, because that's
okay.
I know it's next to frogs.
It's the same area as the woolly mammoth.
Yeah,
it's all in the same.
No, that's absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of the weird things is mammoth actually existed quite a lot later than we realised. I didn't know this, but until quite recently. But they were around. No, less than 1,000 years ago. You could find woolly mammoth in some extremities of the earth. They were. It's as strange as that sounds. And
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's like it's not that long ago. Yeah, it's not that long ago. But they found forms of woolly mammoth or relations of woolly mammoth quite close. I'm thinking sort of Russian tundra type of area. I message you and I'll let you know a bit more. And I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be proven wrong.
It's okay. That whole area, it's where we live, Fisherton area in Salisbury, is you wouldn't think that there would be so much history in one small area. I'm not just talking about the woolly mammoth. I'm talking about because it's the railway station, Salisbury railway station. I mean, there's been 2 railway crashes in that area. There's been the Teddy Haskell murder that we talked about. There was Salisbury massive jail, gallows gates, the executions. It all happened in this real condensed area of Salisbury. And the other day, this will make you laugh. The other day I was doing some research because Fisherton Street in Salisbury, notorious, it was always flooded. Particularly, they had one bad case in 1915 where it was completely underwater, the whole street. And the Fisherton Street was completely covered with mud. It was a dirt track, basically. So it went to the town council to see what they could do about this. And the suggestion was that Fisherton Street should be not paved, but actually should be put down to wood, like in the old Wild West. They wanted wooden sidewalks, and do you know that, Matt?
I did. Yeah, I like the sound of it.
Yeah, they wanted wooden. Yeah, they wanted wooden sidewalks and wooden roads, just sort of like layers of planks put down there. This went before the town council, and it was approved, but then it was turned down at the last minute because I mean it would have been incredibly slippery.
Well, not only that, we've had. I mean, the wooden road, or not the wooden road so much, but the wooden sidewalks are very much a part of the Wild West history where I live. And often they'd also run the fire hoses under them. So the building catches fire, the sidewalks catch fire, you don't have any fire suppression, and the whole town burns down. and those sidewalks are a good conduit of the fire from building to building. So they're not really a very good public safety way of doing things.
Well, the reason
so you're probably lucky that
the reason for it, the town council were trying to save money. That was the main reason. They were trying to save money. They thought, well, the wood
okay.
and stone, so we'll put the wood down. But anyway, it didn't go through. So yeah, we would save that. But you're right. The actual fire would have been a fire hazard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of our old towns, it's a fishing port. The old commercial district was built on piers over the Columbia River, and that it didn't take long for the fire to wipe out all 30 blocks of commercial. The houses were built on actual land, and so the residential community survived, but nothing else did. It was all wood and built on creosoted wood. So
yeah,
put a cramp in the Shanghaiing for a while.
Yeah.
Well, where do you guys? I mean, this is fascinating. Do you have particular places around Salisbury and Wiltshire that you particularly love? And Matt, for you, maybe a second choice, because I know how you feel about Stonehenge.
That's a fair point. Okay, so yes, Stonehenge, love it to pieces. One of the special places for me and my family is in the valley, not far from where we live, and there's a lovely village called Lake, and Lake has just this idyllic feel to it. Has a river running by it with a chalk stream, has Bronze Age burial mounds surrounding it, woodland that you can walk through, and it's a very, very special place. And one of the main reasons we moved to where we are now and where this is being recorded with my lucky friends from time to time, it was to be closer to this area, to be part of that. And the strange thing about so we talk about Stonehenge. I've had the pleasure of talking to you about Stonehenge many times, but it's a World Heritage Site. It's 14 square kilometres, and there's so many highlights within this area. There's beautiful woodlands, beautiful points that have line of sight to Salisbury Cathedral, to Figsbury Rings, to Old Sarum and Stonehenge, and you have this indivisibility that I was very much missing when I was living in town. I love living in Salisbury, but I felt a little bit. I'm a farm boy, and I felt a little bit, you know what I mean?
Yes.
A little bit overlooked and stuff like that, and I realised that. And I know my wife Nat as well. We realised that moving here would be a really good point to sort of look to different areas. And yeah, so there's a wonderful place, William. I'll take you there one day, my friend. Lake. And it has the most wonderful vistas over the most wonderful landscape. And it's so good that, and I'm going to name drop now, that's where Sting lives now. Sting has bought a house there in 1991. Sting bought a house there, and it's almost a hamlet. There's about 10 houses, something like that, not much more. And one of the residents is Sting, and that's how special it is. It's a very, very special place.
Fantastic. Well, in your house where you are now, you've been finding archaeology going back.
Yeah, that's we're very lucky. So where we're sat now, this little this sort of office studio thingy is built on my old vegetable patch, and I spent a lot of time before I put this room here making sure that I didn't miss any archaeology, because I knew that I was in this. I said bowl of habitation earlier. This area where I know that it was a very good place to live back many thousands of years ago, and I was lucky enough to find quite a few flint tools. The best of which was a flint scraper, which is I'm very proud of it. It looks very much like a stone, because it is a stone, but to a discerning eye, and which I only have a very weak one, it's a pretty special piece, and it would have been used and utilized to remove flesh from an animal, that sort of stuff. So I've found many, something called debitage, which is lots of artifacts which are taken off while they're creating flint tools. So yeah, As in, this whole area here, we're about 2.5 miles away from Stonehenge. So there's going to be a lot of working of pink tools around this area, and some really cool stuff, which, as you know, kind of floats my boat. But yes, I'm very much interested in the Salisbury history as well. Ruth, have you spoken to him about the ghosts of the haunch? Have you told him? Have you gone close enough? Are you happy with that?
To tell them about some more ghosts.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Because we've touched on some.
We talked about the window cleaning.
Yeah.
Did you talk about the grassy smell?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. There's a lady that's been seen many times at the launch. And again, I said I don't really believe in ghosts, but for my book, I'm writing the A to Z of the launch of Venison, and there's a piece G is for ghosts. I interviewed a lot of people. Anybody that was a certain age, lived in Salisbury for years, I asked them about the haunch of Venison, and I was told the same story over and over. And that's that people would be there and they would smell on the stairway or in the smaller part of the restaurant a lavender smell. Another person said it was like freshly turned earth. And then sometimes there's a woman that's seen on the stairs or walking across the restaurant after this smell. But so many people told me about it that I don't think they know each other, and I don't think they all got together to make up a story. So how did they all come out with variations of the same story? It's very odd. Somebody else told me, somebody who professed to be psychic, that the ghost that he saw was a little dog, and he described this little dog downstairs in the bottom restaurant. And in fact, I know that the landlord in my little PowerPoint on Salisbury History Festival, there's a picture of a little dog there, which is exactly what he described. That picture I found it in the archives in the museum. I don't think that this man, I can't believe that he went there and he found it and then made up this story. So it's strange that he said that, it wasn't true.
Right, that's very compelling.
Yeah.
And do you have, other than the haunch, do you have favorite places around there?
I love Forum. I didn't know anything much about it as Matt does, but that has a really strange and special atmosphere as well.
It does.
Yeah. And when I've had friends to stay with me, we like to go out for a walk, and it's not very far really from our flat, so that makes a nice walk. And people always find that that there's a really strange atmosphere. I was in as well Trinity Hospital the other day with somebody, and in the chapel there, they have actually the altar stone from the original cathedral at Old Sarum, and that place has got a thick atmosphere. You can almost touch it. You can really feel there's something there at Trinity Hospital. And the third place, another pub, the Pheasant Inn, which is another very old pub in Salisbury, which has links to Frog's family, because his great-grandfather was the landlord for many years and his grandmother was born there. But that place is very, very old, again, very beamed, and there's definitely something there.
Maybe it's Frog's grandmother, great-grandmother.
I don't think so. I think it's something much older, because it's got the Shoemakers Hall. So it was the home of the Shoemakers Guild. It's got a medieval hall there, and it's really in that area where you feel the most of the atmosphere. So I think that it's actually something maybe much older than Frog's grandmother.
Okay. That's fantastic. Yeah. What about you, Frog? Do you have a particular area around there?
Are you talking about haunting or just where I like to be?
Area of interest and study where it just fascinates, or someplace that, I mean, because there's so much there.
I love the old pubs of Salisbury, and you know, there is a place in Salisbury it was called the Old George. It is now Boston Tea Party, like a chain of restaurants.
I've had coffee and a bite there a couple of times, so I know right where you mean.
Yeah, that particular building, tragically, they had the whole bottom area ripped out to make way for a shopping precinct, which was a disgusting thing to happen.
Yeah, you're right.
But the actual building itself, the upstairs part of the building, you can still go in there, and the beams are unbelievable. You know, the age of the place is fantastic, and I was quite lucky because I've been collecting old photographs and postcards of that pub going to from the 1930s. And the manager, I was talking to the manager because one of the ideas for the History Festival was to do a talk inside that pub on the history of the building. And the manager allowed me to go right up into the top attic. Have you been up there? Up there? I haven't. It's only used as a junk room now.
I really went up with him.
Yeah, but he said, I said, you know, what's it like? He said, oh, come on, I'll show you around. But it was a bit of a health and safety. There's lots of things like it's a junkyard, really. But you can still see, you can still see the structure is incredible up there. You know, we're talking serious beams up here. But, and that's why I love the Haunch of Venison as well, because not just for the ghost, although that's a big part of it, but the building itself is just, I don't think really there's another pub like it in Salisbury. You know, there's quite a lot of pubs in Salisbury, but that one just has got, you know, the small rooms and, you know, it's just like a complete and absolute one-off. In fact, it's such a one-off that an American visitor who went to the Haunch built a replica in America.
Really?
Yeah.
Medarts.
Yeah.
Yes, still Medarts. Maybe is it in Carolina?
I tend to think it's a bit of a sacrilege to do that, but
as long as we didn't take the ghost with it, you know, as long as left the ghost behind, we don't mind. But yeah, he built a replica in the States, so it must have had a profound effect on him.
Does it still stand?
Yeah,
it still stands.
Okay.
What a time zone tour to there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you know, you walk around Salisbury Cathedral Close. I mean, the cathedral is just absolutely a thing of beauty, but so is the close itself. You know, if you just around the close and look at the houses, you know, and the history of the houses. Plus, it's got another building called the Wardrobe that's supposed to be equally as haunted as the Haunch of Venison. So you've got that there. You know, sometimes you walk around there. We went there, the Cathedral Close. There's that's where our museum is, Salisbury Museums, in the Cathedral Close. And we just sat there with a coffee, didn't we?
A
couple of days ago.
Yes, in the sun.
Yeah, in the sun, and just thought, well, you haven't got to walk that far to get into this sort of like magnificent architecture. It's a privilege, really, to live in Salisbury. When you see that as a backdrop, to having a lovely cup of tea and an ice cream, you've got all these wonderful buildings. And I don't even include the cathedral in that because we couldn't see it because we had our backs to it. But everything we were looking at, you think to yourself, boy, you know, this is really, really, really lucky. So,
it is.
Yeah. There are places that I love, but can I just tell another quick story that?
Of course.
Yeah. This was through Matt, actually, because Matt was obviously doing some of his own research and came up with this story for me for the new book, Supernatural Salisbury, based on the case of a young girl who had gone missing from home. We're talking 1925, I think it was, 1925. This girl, she'd gone home from work, and then her father sent her out to get some fish for tea. She then bought the fish and then bumped into her cousin. They had a chat. And then she said, I'm not going straight home. I'm going to go for a walk first before I go home. And she was never seen again. That was it, so they sent all these search parties out, but couldn't find her. And then they got this medium from Salisbury to go to the parents' house where the girl disappeared from to take part in this reading. And the psychic said, don't worry, she's gone. She's met someone. She's gone to the seaside. She will be back at the weekend. Well, that never happened. And in fact, they found the girl about a week later. They found her in the river. She'd obviously fallen off a bridge and fallen in the river. Prior to this happening, there was this old tradition in Amesbury that if you got a loaf of bread and put mercury inside the loaf of bread and floated it down the river, where the loaf stopped is where a body would be. And they actually tried this. They tried this out, and it didn't work. It didn't work.
Okay.
But the interesting thing that's just happened, it really is interesting, was this girl, as I say, it's about 1926. This girl lived in a road in Amesbury, which is very close to Stonehenge, called Coltsfoot Close. That was the name of the road she lived in. Now, I do a weekly column for the local Salisbury Journal newspaper. It's like a historical every week. And so I've got access to photographs going right back year by year from about 1952 up to 1969. So each year's got about 2,000 photographs, and I've got access to all these. And I was checking the year out for 1960, and there were all these photographs of the police, and they're obviously searching. They're looking down drains and stuff. So I went to the local newspaper and found out that a girl had gone missing from home in Coltsfoot Close, the same road as the girl in 1927. I haven't tracked it down to if it's the same house. If it's the same house, it's going to be absolutely amazing. But
and the same date or something like that too.
2 murder cases in Amesbury involving a girl that disappeared from home on the same road.
Dude, that's a bit scary. You told me that before.
Yeah.
That's an exclusive, William.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah. But that is fantastic.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's got that story about the loaf of bread. And the local police said that you can't go around putting mercury into bread and floating it down the river because it's going to poison the animals. So what they actually put it into a glass canister with a screw top and put that in the loaf of bread. And they still did this to see if it would work, but it didn't work. But it just goes to show some of the folklore involved in the 1920s, but these folklores had gone on for generations.
Yeah.
And and one of the chapters is going to be on folklore as well. So.
Excellent.
Yeah. I like that story a lot.
I do too. What a fabulous place to live. It is. I'm very happy for the 3 of you being able to live there with a slight tint of envy.
You're welcome anytime, William.
Well, thank you. And anything else any of you would like to add? Make sure we get your information out there again.
Can I think it's a bit weird, right? So we are basically historians, but this evening I showed Frog and Rubes some UFO footage from Stonehenge. I've been asked to verify, and it's mind blowing. And I'm not. This is a world exclusive, and I'm not going to share the footage because I'm not allowed to because of disclaimers and all that. But I've been asked to look at some footage from 2 separate cameras over Stonehenge in daylight.
Okay.
Which is quite powerful. And I showed Frog and Ruby for the first time this evening because I've only showed a very few people. And your opinions?
Staggered.
Yes, amazing.
Absolutely staggered.
And I'm not trying to stitch them up. I'm not trying to be conspiracy theory. This is. I was really surprised at how impressive this footage is that you have over Stonehenge. And it's
the thing about it was that when you first watch it, you think it's one thing. It actually looks like I'm allowed to say this.
Yeah, of course you can. You can say what you think of it.
It actually looks like a man who's being jet propelled. You get these rocket men that can sort of
jetpack.
Jetpack. and they sort of like fly for a short space of time. It looks like that until it then changes shape.
Oh.
It actually changes shape, and you start thinking, this is very, very strange. Very strange. It's not like, well, I mean, I was into UFOs because there were all these sightings, particularly around Salisbury at night, and I've seen quite lots of pictures of supposed UFOs, and you can kind of write them off as maybe being something from the army or something, because there's lots of army bases around here. But I've never seen. And the great thing about this, well, there's two great things. The first thing is it's quite close to Stonehenge, which has got significance, I think.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's done something that I've never seen before.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's really difficult, William, because the team that recorded the footage are a couple of friends of mine who were security guards at the Stones, and they probably won't thank me for mentioning it too much, and I won't mention too much more than this. But the footage they have are from two different perspectives, and are quite interesting, whichever way you put it. And one of them is very excitable, and is a bit shaky footage, but you can get some great images from it. And the other one has some very steady footage on a very high-grade phone, and it's quite hard to argue against. But I'm literally in time zone. Our historians, and we are the last people who would talk to you about UFOs. But interestingly, I have been asked to look into a UFO sighting, and it's the first time I've ever done that, and it's very, very, very interesting. And I'm a little bit freaked out. So much so that I showed these guys, and I think I freaked them out as well.
Well, I look forward to a time when you can show them to me too. This is fascinating, and I'm more history myself, but sometimes there are unexplained things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it hits the definition of unidentified, if flying, and it's an object.
Yeah.
What it may be and where it comes from, I know not. It may be military, it may be a weather balloon, it may be it's flying. It's very hard to identify, and it's an object. And the is quite powerful. But we are very close, I'll be honest with you, and I'm slightly scared the men in black are going to knock on the door now. Is the fact that we are very close to a military research zone. So we have to be, at the same time, I didn't see a thing, sir. I don't know what you mean. And yeah, we weren't there at the time.
Right. Yeah, I watched lots of Time Team, and they've done a lot of digs in Salisbury. So.
Yeah, it's Salisbury plane. The Harrier jump jet, the first really mainstream bottle aircraft, was tested around this area, and there were lots of sightings of it. And locals sort of ridiculed for saying, "Oh, well, I saw something flying vertically. It didn't take me." And they're like, "What do you mean? You're mad!" But it was all official secrets. I'm not saying that it is. I don't understand, but it's something strange going on there. It's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, hopefully you won't disappear. If they do come, like I've told you all before, my guest room waits. It even has a complimentary ghost occasionally. But so you're always welcome. But if the men in black get a little close, just pack up and come on over.
That's a high UFO. Get there double quick.
Yeah. Great. So, Time Zone Tours on Facebook. Is that how did people get you again?
It's a really weird thing, isn't it? Because of the situation we're in, we kind of existing in a. We've had a hard time. We went through Novichok in Salisbury,
True, yes.
and we took a right old kick in the teeth through tours through Novichok, and that was arguably the season before Novichok was our most profitable season, and we were riding a wave of success. So Time Zone hasn't really done much this year. This is probably about the most public thing Time Zone has done this year, sadly.
But you've got your books coming out and several things too. And so I want people to know how they can order them once they're published and things like that too, and be able to go in and the videos from the History Festival are brilliant. They're wonderful to watch, and you have the writings about the different women in Salisbury, which I haven't read all of them yet. I mean, even though the tour hasn't been able to do a lot, the three of you have been quite busy with activities. So
it's one of those relationships that even though this is hit time zone for Salisbury in respect that we can't do our tours, it's the first year we haven't done it in about 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
Because we're researchers, because we're husband and wife anyway, but Matt's our best friend. We know that, as soon as we're able, all we got to do is just say, okay, we're going to start a new season, starting next May, whatever, and we'll get them running again.
Yeah.
Because this has given us an opportunity to research different things. Time hasn't been wasted.
Yeah.
We've been looking at other things. So hopefully, when we do our next walk, we'll have a whole new bunch of research notes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We can do it all over again.
Yeah.
I feel quite proud because you still get stopped in the streets of Salisbury, like people saying, I went on your walk last year,
true.
and I love that bit where you had the jewel. You had the jewel on the green at Salisbury Cathedral. Where we fired these at each other, and people love that sort of thing. Absolutely. So
as they do. Fantastic. Well, before I end the broadcast part of it, any closing, anything from any of you that you want to say? Anything I missed you want to get out or mention?
So from the Stonehenge side of things, happy equinox to everybody, because we're approaching the equinox now, so we're going to have our equal day, or the equinox. That will happen on Monday, I believe. So enjoy your 12 hours of sunshine and 12 hours of darkness. It's a very important day for us at Stonehenge. And maybe we'll see you winter solstice, I hope. Bright blessings. That's what I'd say, William.
And you, yes.
And I just say that anybody that's watching and wants to see some of the things we've been talking about, Salisbury History Festival, if they Google that, then they can see some of our PowerPoints and some photos.
That's so good.
And I'd just like to say that I think it's fantastic you're doing this sort of thing, because it's great to be able to see each other, and that's fantastic, and good for you.
Well, thank you very much. And part of it is selfish motivation. I get to visit with my friends. So great. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll be back with another show in a couple of weeks.
Take care now.
Take care.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.